Morjesta vaan kaikille. Tervetuloa kuuntelemaan Miehen mieli podcastia ja ensimmäisen kerran englanniksi. Ja vaihdankin tästä suoraan englannin kielelle ja toivottavasti ymmärrätte jotain, mitä mä puhun. Ja mä koitan olla mahdollisimman vähän Kimi Räikkönen. Okay, so I'm here with Ole Bjerg from Denmark. Welcome. So,
thank you.
Ole Bjerg is an associate professor in philosophy and economics at Copenhagen Business School. He is an author of several books on a wide range of topics, including ethics, addiction, poker, sustainability, money, and banking. Ole's current research is focused on men, and that's why he is here also. Ole regularly appears as a public intellectual in Danish, as well as international media. His works on money and banking led him to co-found the organization Gold Bench in 2014. His current research on men is driven by an interest in improving the relations between men and women in contemporary society. This interest has also led him into studying and practicing family constellation work. And that's another reason why Ole is here today. So I will first want to share you how I met Ole. I was in a European Men Gathering last year, and I was there sitting and listening these different men talk, and then I don't even remember what was the topic of the conversation, but Ole was in the alone there talking to maybe 150 men. And I was first thinking, who is this guy and what he's talking about? And I'm quite, I don't usually get impressed very often. But when he was talking, I had a little bit similar feeling that when I was listening Jordan Peterson talking, and this got me like, whoa, maybe there is something. And it left me this feeling that I want to know more about this guy. And I went and I joined his family constellation work, and it was really good. And now we did a couple more family constellation workshop online. And when we started doing the last family constellation workshop, there was supposed to be lots of men there, but there was only two, and it was me and Ole. And the session went really, really well, and I was let's say, really touched on what we do. And I felt that there's something real here. And I then asked him to come to talk about these kind of issues with me in the podcast. And lastly, I asked to my podcast men who I admire. And what I admire about Ole, of course, I don't know him really well personally, but what I have felt that I have a deep admiration about his dedication to his work and his academic work, because he's, of course, an associate professor and a writer and researcher, and that needs huge amounts of dedication and discipline to do that, and that's a really big thing for me. And as a person, I feel when I have been working with him, he's really grounded, and first thing what comes to my mind, this kind of warmth of heart, and that's like the main thing why I like Ole and why I admire him. This kind of warmth, manly warmth, what resonates from him. So here is a long introduction about Ole. So please, Ole, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Wow, I'm touched by the introduction. Really moved by it. And then I have this one thing, I just need to get it out of my system. When you were doing the finished introduction, I kind of listened if I could pick up sort of, and the only thing I could pick up was at the very end, you said something that sounded like Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah.
And he's one of, did you say Kimi Räikkönen, yes, or did you say?
Yes, I did.
Ah, you did?
Yep.
What did you say about Kimi Räikkönen?
It was a joke that I hope I don't sound like Kimi Räikkönen. because it's like a Finnish meme that he cannot speak good English and just using like one word and pronouncing everything really horribly. And
okay. So I did get it right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, and you said the question was who are you? Was that the question?
Yep. And what do you do?
Wow. So the one thing maybe you can see behind me here is a map. So I'm sitting in my office here at the Copenhagen Business School, and here's a map of Denmark. And usually I sit on the other side of my desk. So whenever I look up from my desk, I look at this map. And so you said something about being grounded. And I think there's a number of sources that you can kind of draw on in order to be grounded. But for me, a very, very important source of groundedness is my country. I really like Denmark. It's not like, oh, Denmark is better than Finland. I also like Finland, but it's not my country. So but there's something about my country. Yeah. So that's one thing about who I am. I'm Danish. I'm from Denmark, and I'm really happy about Denmark. So that's one thing. I don't know. I really just like the introduction so much. I don't want to spoil it with all kinds of other things. And I think you really, you kind of covered my interests. So I'm interested I work in the field of philosophy and economics. And as you also said, I've been working with money and banking for many years, and to some extent I still do. But I also, for the last 2 years, I've been writing on a new book, which actually I finished it 1.5 hours ago. I just made the last correction. So here it is. You can see it here. This is what it looks like. The title so far is The Question of Being Man, Making Sense of Love, Sex, Work, Truth, Family, and Other Existential Issues since Gender Talk. It's a little bit long time. Maybe the title changes. Maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, so the book here is finished. And of course,
congratulations.
Thank you. So now, of course, it needs to go through the publisher and stuff. So it's going to be a few months before it's out. And I think this question about men and women is something that's interested me for as long as I've been an academic, and perhaps even longer. I used to study sociology, but it's also an issue that I never engaged in it academically, because I felt that the sociological theories that were kind of available to talk about these things, they didn't mean anything to me. I mean, this whole, all this with gender theory and all this, maybe it's good. I think for some people it makes sense, and that's fine. I think philosophy is about making sense of your own life. And if gender theory is what can make sense for you to make sense of your life, fine, go with that. But it just didn't work for me. It's never worked for me. And so I just kind of left that aside, and then my academic stuff was on other stuff. But it's still a question that's been sort of sitting in the back of my mind, this question about men and women, perhaps especially men. And then about 2 years ago, this was when Jordan Peterson came out with his book, 12 Rules for Life. I kind of sensed that something happened. It was like sort of there was like a space that was opened to think about these matters academically, I felt. And I think also what happened when Jordan Peterson came out with his work and the amount of popularity that he gained, it kind of just showed beyond discussion or anything that there's a huge interest in this. all of these young men who were kind of just interested in this work, for me was like just a symptom of something that had been neglected among academics, but also in society at large. But I mean, to the extent that academics and philosophers, our job is to provide people with concepts and theories to make sense of themselves. I think we'd neglected these young men because we hadn't provided theories for them to make sense of themselves. And I think that's Jordan Peterson. He sort of took the first step in that direction. And so that led me to say, okay, fine, now this space is open. Now I will start working on this and start thinking about what it means to be a man. So that's what the book is about the meaning of being man.
So maybe you can tell me what does being a man mean to you? Not in a general. I don't need to you personally.
I'm gonna give you a philosophical answer. Maybe that's it. Philosophy, you can use philosophy for anything. One of the things you can do is if you get a question and you don't know the answer, then you can sort of just say something. You can buy yourself time by saying something philosophically, and that's what I'm gonna do now. So I think I've discovered that there's a difference between being a human being and being a man. And normally we kind of tend to think that first I'm a human being and then I'm a man. So being a man is kind of an add-on to being human. I think it's the other way around. I think first I'm a man. And then secondly, there's this more or less sort of abstract category of being a human, which we can then attach later. And another thing is also being a human being is something you are just by virtue of being born. You don't have to do anything to be a human being. The minute you're born, and maybe even before you're born, you are a human being, and you don't have to do anything. However, being a man, it has this double. On the one hand, yes, you're born as a boy, and then you can grow up to become a man. But we also know that there's something. It's also an ethical calling, or it's sort of and also a challenge. But it's something you have to live up to. We know these phrases like "man up," or you could say he's not man enough to handle the situation, or something like that. And in that kind of implies that it's like an ethical obligation in a way to be a man. There's something you have to live up to, which I think is a good thing. I think it makes us. I mean, identifying as a man and saying, okay, yes, I want to, how can I make the most out of my being man? I think there's a lot of power in that. Okay, so now I don't think I can stall the question anymore. So the question was, what does it mean for me to be a man? I think one of the things that working with family constellations has done for me is that I've realized how much my family relations, how much they actually mean. Like, so being a husband to my wife is a huge source of meaning. I have two sons, being the father of two sons, also a big source of meaning, and also being a son to my parents is also something. So I think for me in those relations there's a lot of meaning, and there's a lot of there's things you need to take care of, but they're also sources of energy in a sense. Yeah,
maybe we can do it a little bit backwards. Can you tell me that if you remember your past, do you remember a point that you felt that you weren't a man?
That I was not a man?
Yeah. Maybe you were a boy, or maybe you were something else. Has something shifted in your life? because the question comes
Yeah.
from that because I have asked the same question for lots of men, and
Yeah.
lots of them, they give me this axis of boy and a man.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the same thing, that becoming a man, and it's
Mhm.
taking the responsibility
Yeah.
of your life and maybe your family, and that there is this kind of straightforward axis there.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's a straightforward axis, but it is true that there's an axis there. I mean, the one thing that kind of springs to mind is that after my first son was born, so he's 17 now, and when he was born, or after he was born, a while after he was born, his mother and we broke up. So we were not together. And then there was a lot of complications around that, which kind of sort of threw me into a completely new life situation where I kind of realized here's something that I need to handle in a way. And I think it was like a double wrecking. On the one hand, I came to realize that I thought I was already a man. And then when I was thrown into this, I kind of realized, no, you haven't been tested yet. Here's the test. Now we're going to test if you are a man, if you can handle this. So on the one hand, there was that sort of realization. And then, and also, I also came to realize a lot of aspects about what it means to be a man, and also some of it had to do with society. Like I come from Denmark, so I'd also always heard this story about, in Denmark we have equality and all this blah blah blah, right? And to the extent that there was no equality, it was always the women who were the victims and the men who were the perpetrators and so forth. And then I was kind of thrown into this legal issues about divorce and the kids and all this, and I came to realize that it's much more complicated than that. And as much as it was a difficult time, I think it's also been a gift to me. And I think some of the things that I'm doing now, I don't know if I would be doing those things if I hadn't had that experience to sort of be sort of thrown out of my sort of straight course, to the extent that it was straight at that time.
And there's this question that we can have the axis of boy and man, but then we have the more difficult axis of man and a woman. And I think we can all say that there are differences between man and a woman. And I have had this same conversation many times, but it seems that always it comes to the same point, that nobody can really define what is a man, because at the same time it will define that what is not a man. So can you talk about this problem of defining a man?
Yeah, this is a huge theme in my book here. And the way I go about it is I try to avoid defining man in relation to woman. So, and I also try to avoid this, to some extent, I try to avoid this question of whether any differences between men and women, are they biological or are they cultural? So given that I'm a philosopher, I say they are ontological. So, which means that being a man is part of it's part of my being, you would say, sort of philosophically. So what does that mean? Well, so the starting point, I think, what defines a man is that he is charged or challenged with the question of figuring out what it means to be a man. And of course, there's a certain circularity in this, but at the same time, I also think it makes sense. And it also makes sense if we do want to talk about women. I think that's a key difference between a man and a woman, is that a man needs to figure out what it means to be a man. Whereas a woman, she doesn't have to, or she's not confronted with the question of what it means to be a man, because she's not a man and she doesn't have to be a man. Then she may be confronted with a question of what does it mean to be a woman, which is a different question. That's not in the book. It's because it's only a book about men. It's not a book about women. So, but I think there is this, I mean, it's a little bit like a twist on, so one of the philosophers, or the main philosopher that I built on in the book is the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. He died, he's dead, but he's one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. So, and what he says, he kind of thinks about what defines human beings as opposed to animals or any other, or rocks or chairs. And he says, well, it is that we are sort of confronted with our own being. We have to think about our own being and figure out what does it mean to be me, right? So that's kind of, whereas a lion is not, it just roars and then it just charges and eats a zebra and then goes to sleep and then wakes up again and maybe it screws a female lion and then it goes to sleep again, right? Whereas we kind of need to think about these things. And I think that it's just, so I kind of build on that and say, well, the question I'm confronted with is, what does it mean to be a man? And those things involve, then when I start thinking about myself as a man, what I realize is that I have the capacity to make children, not alone, but with a woman, Yeah. So that's one thing okay, what to do about that? I have this gift that if I put my penis in a vagina and all goes well, there's a new human being. That's quite a big thing, right? So you need to figure out what to do with that. The other thing I realize is that I'm sexually attracted to women or to men, if that's what I am. But most men are attracted to women. So, and we can have sex and stuff can come out of that as well, like sort of enjoyment and all kinds of other things. So that's another thing I kind of need to think about. And then the final thing, well, the third thing is I'm also confronted with the fact that I'm capable of love, that I can love other people. So I also need what to do about that. So in a way, you can kind of say I've been given these three sort of gifts, in a way: procreation, sex, and love, which are capacities that I have. And so the meaning of being man has to do with, what do I do with these things? What do I do with this? Yeah.
So two questions comes to my mind. And first, what you were talking about Heidegger, and this, it was kind of biblical in that sense that if I remember correctly, the biblical figure Jacob, and the name of Jacob means struggling with God, and he's struggling with the angel in the Bible, and it clicked something in my mind that being a man is to struggle with what is to be a man. That the struggle there is one part of the being a man, and I don't know if maybe some woman has the same in this area this time, the same struggle, but I don't think so. At the same time, I don't think that it is the same thing. I like that a lot, but also this you were talking about this kind of biological argument there about the that you are capable of doing a new life there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, kind of, because in somewhere the conversation is that is manliness or being a man grounded in biology, and that I think that's really heated topic, but
Mhm.
I think that I don't know. Have you ever read this student of Carl Jung, and the name escapes me right now. He has this origins and history of consciousness. Eric Fromm, I think. But anyway,
Eric Fromm, yeah.
he talks about that that our consciousness has a biological root, that we cannot kind of escape the biological root of our consciousness, meaning that for thousands and thousands of years there has been this split between male and female, and sometimes some kind of mix between those evolutionary these kind of mismatches. But usually men and women, you look at animals, you look at almost every sorry, my English is a little bit rusty, but anyway, about the biological roots of being and man, why is it so controversial?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's easier. It's easier to be a human being, and it's also easier just to be a person than to be a man. And I also think it's easier to be a person than it is to be a woman. Yeah. I don't think it's easier to be a man than being a woman. I don't know about that. I haven't been a woman, so I don't know that. But I do know. I think it's also pretty difficult to be a woman. So, but I think being a person is much easier. And being a person, when you identify as a person or just identify as a human being, you don't have all these the gifts that I talked to you about before. They don't emerge as issues in the same way as when you identify as a man. When you identify as a man, you kind of think, okay, what to do about kids? Should I have kids? Should I find a woman? Should I have sex? Should I love? All this. Whereas if you're a person, you can just be, oh, I'm a person. Yeah, that's fine. You're a person. Yes, it's not so. You're not so challenged in a sense. So it's more like a safe space. And I think some of the discussions about these biological differences, I think what they tend to provoke or invoke are these other questions of what to do about women, what to do about family, what to do about all this stuff. And I think many people, maybe especially young people, for perfectly legitimate reason, they find that really difficult. They struggle so much. Maybe their own parents divorced, and there's all kinds of stuff there, and there can be all kinds of reasons why you find it difficult to navigate this sort of how to create a family and all this. And so I think denying biology or sort of pushing that to a side is also a way of pushing these questions to the side and say, I don't have to worry about kids or family or stuff like that. All I have to worry about is realizing my own individuality as a person, blah, 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 all of this. I think that's one of the reasons why biology is pushed to the side.
So if we have the role of a man and it has its own traits, the sociological and biological history of the male role, and you are saying that there is lots of energy in the role, but there is also limitation, and at the same time there's limitation and there is this kind of if you are grounding yourself to be a man, then there's something that you are not, that you will have to take away something, and that means that you cannot be kind of free anymore. But at the same time there is lack of freedom, but there is still kind of this kind of, I would say, as I do like Jung so much, that kind of archetypal male energy there in the role of man.
No, that's a really good point. And I think that's also a part of, I think, accepting biology as an element of your being is also accepting some sort of limitations, as you said, and also something which is in a sense bigger than you, something you can't change. And one thing that's puzzled me is that you can hear there's some political or some positions in the political spectrum where you find a strange combination. So you will have the same people on the one hand saying, oh, there's a climate crisis, the planet, all life will end. We need to find a way of respecting the limits of nature. We have to take care of the planet. We have to take care of the planetary boundaries. We have to blah, 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 rediscover nature and all this. So when they talk about the planet, it's all about nature and limitations. The same people will then say, oh, but when it comes to gender, there's 120 different ones, and you can just pick and choose which one you want. And if you get tired of one, you can just pick another one. And you can change it from one day to the other and all this. So here, when it comes to like human nature, there's no boundaries. There's no limitations. And I find that's weird. How does these two connect? How can you, when it comes to the outer nature, say, oh yeah, planetary bound, but inner nature, no limits. You can do anything. There's even, I mean, though I will, yes, that's extreme, but you will even find people saying stuff like, yeah, so men can have babies and crazy things like that. So I find that strange. This disconnect. Maybe it's just because I'm a philosopher, but there's something weird about that. But it is true, and I think it has to do with our idea of freedom. So I think one idea about freedom is no limits. Freedom is the fact that I can just do whatever I like, I can follow my immediate inclinations. That's one idea about freedom. Another idea about freedom is that being free to, I don't know what is the English word. In Danish, it's hengive, like I wouldn't say submit, because it's not, but you sort of let go of you kind of accept that there's something bigger than you. And there's a certain limitation in that. That's kind of, I don't know how much we're going to go into philosophy, but that's kind of freedom that Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, that he speaks about. He says that autonomy or freedom is the capacity to follow the moral rule which is in you, which is a universal rule. So it's not about following my emotions. He would say a person who follows his or her emotions is not free. It's the opposite. Is a slave of his or her desires and emotions. Whereas true freedom is being able to follow a principle which is higher than yourself. So those are two different ideas of freedom. And I think this whole idea of sort of wanting to push away biology when it comes to gender and stuff is derived from the first idea of freedom.
But then I think we have to think about also responsibility in there, because when you take a role, you have a kind of responsibility there. I don't even say that you can even take role of a man. I think it's kind of grounded in biology so deeply that you cannot change that. I think you can change that, but I don't believe it really works that way. But I mean the responsibility there, that if I take a role as a man and I ground there in my manliness, I am responsible on something else than me. There is this kind of continuation.
Yeah.
What's the word?
Continuity.
Continuity. Yeah. Of what has man been before? That there is this kind of archetypal role of a man, and it's also for safety of others, because I mean that when I go to the room where there is lots of only men there are kind of rules there what are not said aloud, but the rules are different when I go to room where there are women, and there I have different kind of responsibility as a man there, and I think it's to with biology of just this sexuality and reproduction. What's the word?
Reproduction. Yeah.
Reproduction. Yeah, and that when I take the responsibility of being something, I'm also responsible for others to help them to define me. If I'm a man, people know how I would probably act. Do you understand what I'm?
Yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah,
I have to say this talk is so high level that I can speak it in Finnish, but when I try to say it in English, it gets in. But anyway, I hope you understand something what I'm.
What is the word being? What is that in Finnish? And what is the word man in Finnish?
Being is oleminen.
Oleminen.
Oleminen. It's like it's. I don't know if it's a straight translation. And a man is mies.
Oleminen, mies.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Not quite. Say it again.
Oleminen.
Oleminen.
Yeah, it's like Ole. Yeah.
Yeah. Oleminen.
It's I am is minä, I olen is am.
Yeah. Oleminen, and then man is mies.
Mies, yeah.
Mies. What is woman?
Nainen.
Nainen.
Yeah.
Nainen. Wow, that's wow. Okay, so I get your point, and I don't disagree substantially with it. However, I hesitate to put so much emphasis on biology, and but I'd rather talk about ontology. And of course, ontology is like a really heavy philosophical word, and it's not one that we use sort of in our daily conversations. But ontology actually means the science or the knowledge of being. So I think sometimes when we talk about biology, we use it as a substitute for ontology. So because I'm not so certain, and I think that's where evolutionary psychology sometimes it goes a little bit too far, in the sense that it kind of says, well, thousands of years ago it was like this, and then it stayed like this, and da. So therefore, and then they kind of go from there to this is how it was, and then they go to, so this is how we should behave now, right? So they go from something descriptive to something normative. I don't think you can do that with biology, because I don't think biology as such sort of compels us to do anything. But I do think that ontology does. So I think the mere fact of having sort of been born into the world as a man, or does it does sort of carry with it some sorts of ethical responsibilities. I will say, however, I also do think that there's many different ways that you can kind of live up to those responsibilities, or take those responsibilities upon yourself. I think there's many different ways you can do that. And for instance, like take the issue of kids, like children, like I was talking about being able to have children and what to do about that. I don't think we have an obligation to have children. But I do think that the way you should go about this question about having children is not, you shouldn't pretend it's not there. You should kind of look at it and say, okay, I can have children. Should I do this or not? So you should kind of take responsibility for that, rather than just, on the one hand, pretend that it's not an issue, or on the other hand, just let yourself get carried away by something, and then either you don't have them or you do have them. But I think you should kind of, take it upon yourself. I'm also very fond of Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, and he also talks about this, how ethics is, it's not so much necessarily about what you choose, but ethics is about the fact that you choose the choice itself. Yeah. So rather than just letting things happen or just go with your immediate feelings, you kind of say, here's the choice. I will now make the choice, and I will take responsibility for the choice. So I kind of what I want to do with the book, and also what kind of makes sense to me, is to move the debate or the question a little bit from the realm of biology and then into this realm of ontology.
And I hope I can read your book and go deeper into this subject. But I think we are a little bit, for my questions, they will start circling the same.
Let's move on to something else. Yeah.
So, family constellation, and it's. Can you define what is it? I do know what family constellation is. Can you tell me, because it's, for me, I have this problem that if somebody asks, and so what is family constellation? It's really hard to define it.
Yeah. Okay, I will stop with the philosophy, but I have to say one more thing with philosophy. So there's Heidegger, there's like the two greatest philosophers of the 20th century. One is Heidegger, the other one is Wittgenstein. And Wittgenstein, he has this one phrase that I really love, where he says, and I'm going to say it in German, I will translate it. He says, "Es gibt allerdings Unaussprechliches. Dies zeigt sich. Es ist das Mystische." What this means is that there are things which you cannot say in words, but they show themselves. And this is the mystical, you could say, something along those lines. So what he's saying is, there's some parts of reality that we can describe and put into words, but there's other parts of reality which we can't put into words, but they are there, and they will just show themselves, manifest themselves. And I think about that a lot with family constellations, because you can explain parts of it, but there's also parts of it that you just have to experience it. You have to be there, and we could compare it to sex. Yes, you can tell, yes, then you take the penis, then you put it into the vagina, then it's very nice, but before you actually try it, you don't really know what it is. It's the same with family constellations. So I will say something about what we can say about it. For me, it's a philosophy. So there's a theory about it. It's a theory about the way that humans work, men and women, but it kind of understands humans as part of systems. So there's a theory about how, when I do stuff and the things that drive me, a lot of that, or some of that, is coming from kind of the system that I'm a part of. So it's coming from my family. And my family is it's not just my immediate, like my wife and my kids, but it's also my parents. It's even my grandparents, and it's my brothers and sisters, and it can be my parents' brothers and sisters, and so forth. So there's a theory about the dynamics of a family system. And they are quite well described. It's quite clear what those principles are. there's a principle of belonging, there's a principle of exchange, and there's a principle of hierarchy. Those are kind of the three principles of a system. And those principles will kind of, regardless of what we do, they will kind of set themselves through in my being, so to speak. So on the one hand, there's the philosophy. Then family constellation is also a method. It's also, so when you work with family constellation, you kind of, what you do is first of all, you collaborate with the other people who are there. You can do it one-on-one, like we did. You can also do it with more people. If you have like a group of 20 people, what you do is you sort of mobilize the collective resources of that group in order to solve, you could say, an issue that one of the participants have. So a participant will present an issue, and then you will use the other participants in the group. You will include them as representatives of people or elements in his system. And this is where the mystical comes in. You know this because you've tried it. So the mystical thing, or what you don't understand before you see it, is that you can have, this is what happens all the time. You will have someone in family constellation who will present an issue like, I can't hold a steady job. I don't know, whenever have been there for a year, I quit, or I get into a fight with my boss and then I'm kicked out or something like that. And then I start a new job and then it starts all over. So there's this pattern of, which is obviously not very good for my life. Okay, so that could be an issue. And then you will kind of look at that issue. You could pick a representative for the job, and then what may happen is that you figure out, there's something, his mother is relevant to this problem, for instance. Then you pick someone in the group to represent his mother. And the strange thing is that when this representative who knows nothing about him, she then comes into this circle or space, she will kind of get some of the feelings that are relevant to his relationship to his mother, which is strange to say the least. Yeah, you're smiling because you've tried it, so you know what I'm talking about. So, but it's really strange, yeah. And at the same time, when you're in it, it's not strange. It's just like, yeah, of course, that's what it is. Yeah. So there's this method, which is also very unique to family constellation. So family constellation is a philosophy, and it's a method, and then it's also a number of other things. I think it's also the kind of experience you get when you engage in family constellations is, it's also very obvious that there's an element of spirit. You kind of activate some sort of spirit there. And in our contemporary times, we find it's a little bit awkward. This spirituality is sometimes talked about in sort of a slightly derogatory way, right? So we are uncomfortable with spirituality, I can say. But that's what happened. There's this, you get this sense of connection with the other people, which is kind of a spiritual connection, if you like. So maybe that's the third element. So philosophy, method, and spirit are the three sort of elements in family constellations.
So how did you get started in doing that? Why was it interesting, and what happened?
Speaking about men and women, it's thanks to my wife. So we kind of sort of stumbled upon it. We were doing something else, another kind of workshop development work, and then we met this couple, this other couple, and then we got. I was talking to the man, and my wife is talking to the woman, and then you kind of, so what do you do? What do you do? And then the woman here, she was doing family constellations, And she was talking to my wife about it. Then at some point, my wife sort of, you need to hear this. And then I remember the woman, she explained kind of a little bit what I've just explained here in a different way, but similar. And I clearly remember, I have no clue what I was thinking, there's something that I've misunderstood. How can this work? It sounds, but I really liked this woman, and I had sort of immediate sort of confidence in her. I was kind of thinking, I don't know what you're doing, but I can sense that you know what you're doing. So I was, and then also my wife was like, oh, we should do this with our family. It would be good for our family. And so she kind of put it into motion, and I was like, yes, we'll do it. So I just followed along. So I kind of just thrown into it without really knowing what it was. And then from there, it was just for me at least, once I'd experienced it, I was just like, wow, I want more of this. Yeah. And the woman that I was talking about, not my wife, but the other woman, she's now my teacher. She's the one teaching me how to do it, and she's amazing. She's amazing. So maybe I should. So her name is Doris, and she's the student of Bert Hellinger, and Bert Hellinger is sort of the grandfather of family constellations, or whatever you like to call it. He's kind of the guy who invented it, or at least put together the different pieces that were necessary to do family constellations. So I just sort of fell into it in a way. And did that answer the?
Yeah, it did answer, and I would add one thing about family constellation, that it also helps you grow as a human being, when you are seeing these all kind of different family histories and dynamics, and some are really, really harsh, and there's the idea that there is a facilitator, and there is the one who gets the constellation, and there is people who are looking at the constellation also. And they do matter, and sometimes just looking can be really, really effective. And like I remember we had a family constellation session here in my workplace, and there was this lady who she didn't really like the family constellation at all, and she said, I don't know, does it even work? And after the session we shared that she said that I didn't feel anything. Only one time when I was looking at this Finnish war scenery where men were weeping at the dead men, then she felt so much sadness there. And I feel that's really beautiful to put. Only when you have to just look at these kind of situations, and it can be a really, really effective work. And you learn a lot about yourself when you are looking at other people's destiny.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I think also what it does to me is that you find out that you find, or at least for me, I kind of find rest in just being sort of I don't know, how can I say, like on the same level as other people. Like it's, at least for me, I've kind of had the experience of in some relations or in some context where I participate, I sort of immediately kind of go, I go into sort of a competition mode, like, I want to be better than this guy, or who's the best here, and am I better than the others, and all this kind of thing. And you can use a lot of energy on that. But what I think in family constellations, I just slide into sort of this feeling of, you have your history, I have mine history. We all have kind of things we need to work on. None of it is more or less interesting than the other. Everything, and everyone kind of we all have like our history and our things we need to deal with. And so you get this sense of just being. It's not so important whose problems are bigger than whose, and you see that everyone kind of has whatever issues they come with. It wasn't very clearly put, this thing, but there's some sense of just a.
So maybe it's really humbling.
Yeah, that's the word. That's the word. Humbling in a really good way. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yes, thank you.
And let's because when I do my facilitator training, I do it with women, only women. There's 10 women, and my teacher is woman also. A woman also. And but then I have done a little bit work with men only, and with you and with a couple other situations. Can you talk about, because my podcast it's Mind of a Man, and this is mainly thinking about men. So what can men benefit on doing family constellation work?
Yeah, I think first of all, I want to talk a little bit about why I think it's mainly women, because that's also my experience. Even though there's usually
my next question anyway. So
okay, so let's
But then look at first,
Yeah, so I also experienced that it's predominantly women, although there are also men there where I do it. And I think we should give credit to the women here, because I think there's some context where men are like the, I don't know, pioneers, or like technology, for instance. I mean, yes, women can also do invention, but I think we can be on, okay, most inventions like technological innovations have been done by men. Yeah, I think that's fairly straightforward. However, I think in terms of personal development and sort of alternative new methods of therapy or stuff like that, I think women are more entrepreneurial and more innovative and they're willing to take greater risks in a way than men are. So that's my own personal experience. If it hadn't been for my wife, I don't think we would have done that. I don't see how I would have ever found, but she was like, oh yeah, we'll try this. We'll just, and I just tagged along, and that was my luck. So I think in those terms, I think women, so I think we should just say, well, right now this is a new thing. I know it's been around for a while, but it hasn't sort of hit the mainstream yet. I think it will, but it hasn't really done that yet. So we're in a situation where women are like the early adopters of this. They are sort of the avant-garde of this, pushing this forward. So I think we should really give credit to women here. So yeah. So the question you were asking is, what can men get out of this? I was almost, what can't men get out of this? I think the first thing you said, grounding. The grounding you're talking about with me, I think to some extent in some respects, I've also always been sort of fairly grounded, I think, but I will say that this work, which I've been doing now for not even 2 years, but has just grounded me much more than I was before. So that's one thing men can get out of this, more grounding. And grounding has to do with connection to your country, as I said, but also connection to your roots, and first and foremost, your masculine roots. So your father, his father, all of that lineage, you kind of, once you kind of open up that source of love and energy, that just gives you a lot of grounding. But also your mother as well. It's different, but she's equally, maybe even more important in some respects. But so you can get sort of good energy and what do you say, power to act in a way is some of the things you can get. Then another thing you can get is that it just improves. It can just help you with your personal relations, not first and foremost on with your wife. If you have a wife, if you have a woman, then that's another thing you can get out of this. Is you you figure out some of the dynamics in your relationship to your woman, which both of you are perhaps you're kind of caught up with or caught up in, and then you get sort of tools. You work with these, and then you kind of find ways of moving towards new patterns, new ways of being together.
And I think for if we are talking about men's work here, and there's lots of, and the next European Men Gathering, the topic is fatherhood, I think.
Make fathers great again. I think it's the title of it. So,
but I for me, and I think this is same for every man, that one of the biggest things that if you want to grow as a man, you have to deal with your situation and your emotions and your history with your father.
Yes.
And I think that can be the biggest thing what family constellation work can bring to, if you want to grow as a man.
No, perfect. Completely agree with that. And what I see in these constellations is over and over again is that there seems to be like a tendency. It's not always like this, but there's a tendency for the women. They come with an issue, and it can be whatever. It can be something with their children, something with their partner, something with whatever. And then a lot of it just comes back to their mother. So they kind of need to work on their relationship with their mother. And the same with their fathers, or the men. We come with all kinds of issues, and then you need to work with your relation with your father. I will add here, however, that a very, very big difference between this work with family constellation and many other forms of therapy, like psychoanalysis or at least some other forms of therapy, they kind of encourage people to, you should be angry with your father. You should judge your father. You should, now let's talk about all the bad things about your father. Let's get them out there and all this. So talk down with your father. And family constellation is the complete opposite. Of course, it's not like, let's pretend your father was a big hero or something, but it's more like being at ease with, this is your father. This is who he is. This is what it is. Yes, which is great in itself. It focuses on the mere fact that you have a father. So it's not about, is he a good father? Is he a bad father? Away with that. It's just coming to terms with, this is who he is, and this is who you is, and this is how the relation is. And and you can sense that when you listen to other people talking about their father. If you pay attention, you can hear if they start talking bad about their father. At least I get the sense that the energy kind of and the strength, it kind of evaporates. In a sense, they become weak, or you get this sense of weakness. So I think in at least some way, in some forms of therapy that work with relationship with men, you spend way too much time, way too much energy sort of thinking that it's about judging your father. And family constellations, we shouldn't do that.
And I think it comes to this philosophy of Carl Jung, because Bert Hellinger was a student of Jungian analysis. And kind of the idea there is that, and this same theme comes from, I just yesterday finished the Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning book.
Oh, wow.
For third time. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite difficult book.
I can.
And he was talking about his father. He was writing a letter to his father about this kind of that. that when he was growing up, he didn't verbally learned about his father. He first learned it from like bodily feeling and just paying attention about what is a father, since he was like zero a baby. And this interpretation, what's the word? Interpretation of father build up inside out in his psyche, that what is a father, what is my father, and there's there, my father acts like this, talks like this, does like this kind of, and this model of a father starts living in us, in every one of us. And of course there is this image of mother also, and Jung would talk about an archetype of a father. But anyway, and that's the kind of block where what's the word, kind of you have your psyche is built on couple stories, and one story is what is my father and how does it act, and what is my mother and also other people's in the family, and it's part of you, and your father lives in you. And if you don't get a good relationship, I don't say you have to have a good relationship with your physical father, but in yourself, your father, you will lack energy because it's in you. You are, this is kind of building block. Yeah, that was the word. Your story of your father is your own building block. Yeah, that was I was talking about. And you have to find that building block in you and learn to take it in fully if you want to have the energy and live your own life fully.
So my teacher, she often says, if you judge others, when you judge others, you judge yourself. And I think that's very much true in our relations to our parents. So if you judge your father or if you judge your mother, you are judging yourself. It just, what that does is it just binds a lot of energy there. This whole sort of, you lose if you all the time are in this mode of who's better than who and who's good enough and who's not good. It just it takes so much energy, and if you can not do that and just say this is what it is, and this is what it is, then you can use that energy for good stuff instead of just having it running around in you. Maybe I want to add something. So we also met at you mentioned the European Men's Gathering last year, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, so this was last year was my second European Men's Gathering. My first one was in 2018. And I remember this was when it was out in a forest in Sweden. And I remember, and there's only men there. And I think at the time we were like 140 men, something like that. And I remember coming out there and realize I didn't know that it was going to be that many men. I thought it was just going to be 30 or something. So I saw all these men. And then, but very quickly, I had this feeling, there's something different here. There's something different. There's something not missing, but there's something that's not here. And I came to realize that what had happened was that there was no competition. They had sort of, the way it was organized, and also I think one of the reasons was that there was no women there. So there was nothing to compete for. It was just like, oh, here we are, all these men, nothing to compete for. Let's do something else. Let's just help each other or something else. But I remember that feeling of not having to compete with other men, and just, it was such a relief to me. So letting go of that and just not being preoccupied. Oh, is he better than me? Is he stronger than me? Is he blah, blah, all this. Just let go of that. And I think I get some of the same feelings or senses in family constellations work. You kind of let go of this judging everyone, including yourself, because ultimately that's what's going on. You're judging yourself, right?
Maybe there is this kind of similar idea but Jordan Peterson talks about rescuing your father from the belly of the beast, kind of that you are rescuing your kind of history or your relationship with your father.
Yeah.
Doing this work, and you can have the because I don't know what I'm getting from, but it's just
there's something. I've heard that phrase. I will say I've read 20 pages into Maps of Meaning, and then I didn't. So I haven't. The fact that you've read it 3 times is just wow.
I listened to audiobook. I had audiobook, so I didn't listen.
Anyway. So, but I've heard him say this phrase, rescuing your father from the belly of the beast. And I haven't heard it properly in a context, so I'm not quite sure what he actually means by it. But there's something about it which kind of, where I think, I'm not so sure. Some of it I could go a little bit against family constellations work, because one of the things you shouldn't do is try to solve the problems of your parents. You shouldn't take responsibility for your parents. That's like one of the ground rules of family constellation. Of course, you can help them and stuff like that, but you shouldn't, like, that they have their history and their problems and their things they deal with, and you have yours, and you shouldn't take it upon yourself to. When you do that, you kind of reverse. You become the father of your father. Yeah. So I would be careful with that image.
Yeah, but I think
thinking about.
Yeah, but I think the idea is like mythological and kind of archetypal idea. It's not like rescuing your like real father, but I mean rescuing the image of your father in you. Kind of that you can make peace with your father in you doing the family constellation work, and then you can harness the power of your father in you. That's kind of the idea.
No, I get that. Yeah.
But anyway, let's do the last segment, because we have talked about Jordan Peterson here, here and there, and I have a couple of questions for you. And first is, why were you drawn into Jordan Peterson's work, or Jordan Peterson? What was how did it start? Because I have to say, for people who don't know you, and I was looking at from YouTube, and you have been doing lectures about Jordan Peterson, and also you started writing a book about Jordan Peterson. So it had to have some kind of big impact. He has to have had big impact on you, because you have done lots of work.
Yeah, no, that's true. He did put. I think he certainly put something in motion for me. So the story of how did so I said in the beginning that I used to study sociology, and I was interested in these issues of men and women, but I couldn't find anywhere where there were like proper theories about it that made any sense to me. But what I did find instead was I discovered stand-up comedy. And for me, for many years, stand-up comedy has been like the place where I would learn something about men and women, and I mean that genuinely. It's not even. So for many years, I was very. There's a number of stand-up comedians that I like, but there's one in particular, and that's Bill Burr. I think Bill Burr is one of the greatest philosophers so far of the 21st century. I mean, listening to him, listening to his specials, but also listening to his podcast, I just learned so much about what it means to be a man, and I learned something about how to talk about it. Because I think that's where so I said before that women were kind of like the avant-garde in family constellation. They were the one who were kind of moving the field forward. I think also that in terms of thinking about and talking about issues of men and women, I think stand-up comedians have been the avant-garde, because the philosophers and we were too scared. I mean, we were too scared to speak out. So when someone was saying, there are 27 genders, we would just go like this, right? But the stand-up comedians, they're not afraid, or the good ones, they have courage, they have balls. So they'll just, yeah. And so my interest in Bill Burr kind of led me to Joey Rogan and the Joey Rogan podcast. So I was listening to Joey Rogan, and he had different people on, and one of them was Jordan Peterson. So I heard Jordan Peterson on the Joey Rogan podcast, and then I have a good friend who's called Thomas, and there's something about him. I have this sense that he's living like a year and a half in front of, like, he's kind of speaking to me from the future. So he picks up these things, and anyway, so he said to me, Jordan Peterson, this is the thing. So I was like, okay, so he said it, now I have to look into it. And then the book came out, and then I bought it immediately and read it, and so what it did for me was, I don't know, to some extent, I will say this, and I don't mean it in a derogatory sense, but 12 Rules for Life, it's not so deep, or I don't think it's supposed to be deep either. Like, it's not in terms of the philosophical calories in it, I mean, if you compare it to Heidegger, it's not in the same league. I have
to say this. I think 12 Rules for Life is maps of meaning for dummies. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so maybe that's a joke. Yeah. So, but so I think the significance of 12 Rules for Life, it was not so much so the philosophical depth. It was more like, here's someone who said it. Yeah, what everyone was thinking, someone said it out loud. You know the Danish fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes? Yeah. So there's this child who speaks, he's got no clothes on. And I think in some respects, 12 Rules for Life, it kind of had that effect. And you also remember from the fairy tale, what happened was, so the child spoke out and said, the emperor has no clothes on. Do you remember what happened right after that?
Other people said, I don't know. I don't.
I think they all started laughing.
Yeah. Of course, laughing. Yeah.
Everyone started laughing. So there was it was like a quantitative truth. It was like, okay, so many people are laughing. So many people are. So there was, and when that happens, that you can't really do anything. You can come up with arguments but you just can't. And it's the same with Jordan Peterson. So he kind of put this out, and then so many people responded, which then opened this space. So I think for me, I think what I'm taking from Jordan Peterson, it's not so much the theory. And when you read maps, when you read 12 Rules for Life, it doesn't really say very much about men and women. It's a few chapters. It's not very much. The things he does say, I like. I remember when I read it first, I was like, "Wow, did you just say that?" So, but I think what I've taken is inspiration from his courage, and then another writer that I've had a similar inspiration from is Douglas Murray. Also, I mean, he's brilliant. He's smart. Don't get me wrong. He's so smart. He's so smart and he's so clever. So, but his books, they are not deep philosophy in that sense. They're more sort of polemical. But what I also have taken from him more is his courage to just say, this is how I believe that it is. So for me, writing this book it's also, for me, it's been an exercise in sort of connecting to my heart and my stomach, but sort of connecting all of this and write the things that I feel in my stomach. This is true, and not be afraid. This is something I've learned or been inspired by Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray and other people and Bill Burr and other people as well.
So what do you think, why is the reason that when I was in the European Men gathering, I felt that everywhere I got hear talk about Jordan Peterson, like almost everybody there had read the book.
Okay.
And there must be a reason for that. And is there some kind of lack in our society? Lack in what is it that what do you think that he's tapping on?
Yeah. I think the first thing is that he speaks to you in his books as well as in his lectures. He speaks to you very directly. He speaks about, he speaks to the point where you are in your life. And this is something I also realized. It's also made me think about a lot about, I'm a teacher also. I mean, that's my work. I teach young people. So, but when I speak to my students in the classroom, I don't so much speak to them as in, where are you in your life? I'm more like, oh, here's this theory, here's that theory, blah, blah, blah. Capitalism here, banking there. And not so much, so here's the issues that you're struggling with right now in your life. I think that's one thing, that he kind of speaks very directly to people. He takes them seriously. I think that's another thing. He just takes other people seriously. And you would think that, well, doesn't everyone do that? Well, a lot of academic writing, it doesn't, it speaks to no one, really. It's just like out in this, I'm generalizing here, and there's also a lot of good stuff, but there's something he kind of speaks to you. And then another thing is also, he speaks to you as someone who actually has the power to change his own life. Whereas a lot of the theories that we teach young people at universities today, they're all about, oh, capitalism bad, oh, power here, oh, injustice there, structural, this, that, blah, 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 oh, and the students are like, whoa, 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 and they're like, so what we're teaching them is, you can't do anything to change your life, which is why I think that now we have this Black Lives Matter thing going on. These are young people. I know a lot of them, they haven't got to university, they probably have it elsewhere, but there's some of them, I can recognize some of the things they're saying. I can say, yeah, I know this. I've studied sociology, I know that field, I know where some of this is coming from. And I remember so many discussions or so many things we talked about when I was doing sociology and also afterwards. They kind of always ended up with, how do we make revolution? And the reason is that you would start with something that you kind of, oh, I'm worried about whether I'm going to get a job when I finish, or, oh, I don't feel good enough, or something. You could start with like a personal something. But then the theories in sociology, they always tell you, whatever you feel here, the reason for it is structural. So there's a structure. Then you would think, oh yeah, maybe it has to do with the university. Something's wrong with this university. But then you kind of look into that. Yeah. But university is just a product of capitalism. Okay, so the problem is capitalism. Blah blah. And then you're up here, and then so maybe you start somewhere here. Oh, I'm a little bit insecure or something like that. And then you end with something wrong with capitalism. How can we change that? Revolution. So a lot of these Black Lives Matter young people, they think that the solution to their personal problems is to make revolution and create chaos, and then out of that chaos will grow some sort of new order in which they will not be confused about how to start a family or how to get a job or how to have a proper relationship with their mother or whatever else it is. So, okay, and so back to Jordan Peterson. So what Jordan Peterson is saying is, oh, so you have this problem. He actually, so he has this phrase, like, what is it, like, clean your room, I think it is, or what is it, like, how is it, how does it go? Clean your room before you start criticizing the world or something like that. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah. So he goes the other way around. He's looking about, I think that phrase comes from him looking at a young person saying, oh, capitalism is bad, patriarchy, blah, 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 right? And then he says, well, you're not changing, just shouting out, it doesn't change anything. You need to start with what you can actually change. You can start by cleaning your room, and then you can move from there. So, and then he says, you can actually change something. So, this was you got me up on my political horse here, you can tell. And I will, to sort of connect back to family constellations work, so I've also been, and I still am, politically engaged in money and banking and monetary reform. That's what our organization, Gode Penge, there's actually a Finnish version of that. Yeah. So, and that's about making monetary reform, which I still think is an important thing. However, I could also sense that, okay, we were kind of like, we need to change the monetary system. That's it's not as big as changing capital, but it's quite a big thing, right? So, and we would kind of depend on other people to do it. I mean, the central bank, the government, whoever, we couldn't do it ourselves. So, and I kind of sense there's a certain kind of energy in that, which is kind of nice, but also a little bit. And then in family constellations, it's a complete opposite. It's like, yes, I can change these things right here. Yeah, that's a different kind of energy. And I think that's the kind of energy that Jordan Peterson is speaking to, is the competent individual who can actually do something about his own life. And once he's done that, he can move on and do something for people around him and then work from there. I think my answers are getting longer and longer and longer. Maybe I think I've spent the oxygen here in my office. So, but yeah.
I have this one idea that I don't have anything to back it up, but about Jordan Peterson. Please tell me what you think, because in one of his talks, he's talking about Adolf Hitler and his rise to power. Not as that he was a bad individual, that he was so bad and so hungry for power, and he got up to the ladders or the pyramid, and then he did all these bad things. But it was the corrupt, that German people were corrupted, and there was lots of lying, and he was kind of a archetypal picture of the shadow of German people. That and when he was talking his things to the big crowd, and when he got agitated and he saw that the people were reacting good because he was trying to find the scapegoat for all people's problems, and when he noticed that they were reacting, he will react and start talking about more of those kind of things that gets the counter reaction from the crowd. So it was like back and forth and back and forth, not as Hitler did this consciously, but he was kind of the voice of the shadow of the German. Yeah, and it build up. This kind of negative spiral of German history of Germany. So I was thinking about maybe Jordan Peterson can be this kind of opposite spiral, because he was talking a lot with other people, and he's talking about this kind of that when he talks about responsibility and sovereignty, yeah, of an individual. And he said when he's looking at his crowd, everybody will go silent and people will light up. Oh, what is he talking about? Maybe there's kind of similar energy there, that he's reacting about what people want to hear, and he's talking so much with people, going these tours and doing the podcast and whatever, and people are reacting. And I don't know if it's conscious of him, or maybe it's kind of answering some kind of an inner call of humanity, and the kind of he is a product of kind of this inner wish of human being that there must be something else. And it's not kind of that he has kind of taken this role consciously. Maybe we was just put him there in the pedestal, and now he's talking about these kind of things that people want to also hear.
Yeah, no, I think that's certain. I think if Jordan Peterson had spoken 15 years ago, which he could have, I don't even know his history that well, but he may not have. I mean, he may not have had such an impact. I think he was like, it was the right message at the right time. And if it hadn't been for Jordan Peterson, I think it would have been someone else who had occupied that space. But I like your idea of this sort of positive reinforcement. It's like when you say to people, if you say to people, you are the victim of structural injustice, and the problem is the whole constitution of society. You are making them weak because they will be like, there's nothing we can do about that, right? Other than scream and shout, but we can't really change that. But if you say to someone, you're strong, you can change stuff. It's right there in front of you. You can just, if you just take small steps, you'll be fine. Then they grow and then they become strong. And I think that's what he's doing. And then I will add, I just, now that you mentioned Hitler, again, I haven't studied, but as far as I know, Hitler, he grew up without a father. That's an extremely important historical fact that we have to keep in mind. It's not excusing him, but it's part of understanding who he is, where he's coming from. And
you mentioned about this story that makes people victims, and I would like to a little bit go back to the theory of family constellations, because I think that one of the biggest philosophical realizations for me is that to understand the victim-perpetrator dynamics in relationship and in society, and I think also Jordan Peterson taps into that kind of exposes this kind of meta-narrative of this victimhood, and he kind of laid it out. Here is it, look at this, and this is happening all over the place. And that you can also learn this, understand it through family constellation, and it's really, really powerful story that we tell it without knowing.
That's true. And it's what you see. I'm not saying you can't see it elsewhere, but what you see very clearly in family constellations is that if you decide to move into, or if you're caught in sort of this victim-perpetrator dynamic, if you are the victim, then what you're doing is that you're putting your destiny in the hand of the perpetrator. You're saying, in order for my situation to change, you need to change. You are the one who needs to act. I can't do anything because I'm the victim. You are the perpetrator. You are the one who has all the power. You are the one who has all the, and so that just makes you weak in a sense, or it's you can't do anything about your own situation. In fact, you can kind of the only thing you can do is just dig deeper and deeper into it. And it's only when you let go of that dynamic that you get power to change your own. You can kind of say, okay, yeah, this is what happened. It was not very nice or whatever, but it's part of who I am now. Yeah. Once you do that and you accept what has happened, you accept the past, you don't have to elevate them. You don't have to, you just have to, this is what it was, and here I am now. When you do that, then you get the power to move on. And I've seen that in plenty of constellations where when people get out of that, they're just like, oh, whew, yeah, wow, I can do all kinds of stuff, find a new husband or whatever it is. Yeah, there's so much life in that. Yeah.
And I also had one more question about family constellation, or one thing I wanted to talk. I forgot to ask it. It was about you were started talking it. You started about when we started the podcast. You were talking about the groundedness in your roots and in your country. And in Finland we have this word that if you are patriotic, it is isänmaallinen, which means isä is father and maallinen is kind of land, that you are acting as like towards your land of your father. And I love the word because it has some kind of spiritual story behind it. Can you talk about that? Why is good for us to ground it in our own culture or our own land, and what is doing with the relationship with what is my father's land and this kind of dynamic?
Yeah. So you phrased the question, why is it good? That's one of the good things, one of the beauties of family constellation is it's so empirical in a sense. So sometimes you don't know why things work, or you don't know why it has to be like this, other than you can see what happens when it's not like this. Yeah. And you can see that when we then change things, and when people do connect to their country, or do connect to their father, or do connect to their mother, we see what that does to them. And it's just like, wow, that's just way better than that. Why is it important to connect to your country? Why is it important to connect to your country? I don't know. I don't know if I can tell you why. I can say what it does to people. I mean, it just part of it. So one of the things that you see in family constellation is that if you want to exclude something from your system, the more you try and exclude it, the more it comes back, the more it binds energy, right? So if you're like, oh, I don't like my mother, oh, she's not good enough, oh, blah blah blah, all that. If you do that, you have very little energy for anything else. For instance, you have very little energy for your children because you're occupied over here. Oh, I have to spend all my energy pushing my mother out, and the kids are over there. They're like, oh, mother, but I can't. You have to take care of yourself. I'm spending my time, right? So, and they will probably do the same when they grow up. They will be like, oh, my mother, she was never there. Blah blah blah. That's the dynamic, and it's the same with your country. Of who you are.
Hey,
and when you talk about
say again, because it was I couldn't hear you when you started.
So your country is part of who you are. And when we say country, what do we mean? Do we mean the country where we live, or no? We mean the country of your father. So if you have Finnish father and whatever Bulgarian mother, you're Finnish. And you can do a lot to sort of push that out, but you can't push it out because it's part of you. So what you're doing is you're trying to push away something which is part of who you are. It's the same dynamic as with your parents. So and not only are you spending all your energy trying to push it out, you're also blocking yourself from taking the energy that could come from your country. Yeah. So your country has a lot to give to you, but you need to be prepared to take it.
And
yeah.
what about this is that I think in other countries too, but in Finland, in political sphere, there is this one. It's the party called the Finns, and they're kind of the main thing that they are Finnish people, and they're really conservative and conservative values, and there is a huge gap between them and everybody else. And this kind of all the leftist people are like shitting on them because they that's their like main narrative of being Finnish. And I'm kind of torn between them, because by doing family constellation work and working with men, I have learned to love my roots and love that I'm Finnish. I'm so proud of being Finnish and my country and my good working society and everything. It felt so good, and I get the energy when I'm talking about this. This is amazing that we have this kind of situation. This is like really, really rare in this world right now. And at the same time, I feel that if I express it, let's say in social media, I get this kind of attack that it's not good to be proud of being Finnish. And do you know, and I think the same dynamic is coming, and I understand that the problem of conservative thinking is that if you go too far, then you are a Nazi. But like that, there is no like a spectrum there, that you cannot be proud of your country and at the same time being a responsible human being and not being bigot or racist.
Yeah. So what is the question here?
I don't know if there is a question.
No, I get it. I mean, I get it, and I also. I don't know how to answer this. So of course I recognize this. Like I recognize these. There are these again. There are these political positions somewhere on the left spectrum that have this sort of all against, or you shouldn't use the flag, or just trashing Denmark. So I think one dynamic could be, you would have to look. I mean, it's with family constellation, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to sort of generalize with. I mean, different people can have like different reasons for wherever they are. So, but I think one possible dynamic could be. And again, it's the same with parents. When you're judging your own parents, saying, "Oh, they're not good enough. He was never there." Blah 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 blah. All this kind of stuff. You are making yourself bigger than your parents, and I think that there's an element of satisfaction in that. So, I'm big. I'm bigger than my parents. I can judge them and say if they're good or bad and stuff like that. There's a certain it kind of speaks to our ego. But it also binds a lot of energy, which you realize when you sort of change the dynamic, and it's another form of energy. And I think it's the same with your country. You can kind of, if you trash your own country, Denmark, racist, blah blah blah, all this, you can feel bigger than your country, And when you see that in a constellation, and I know for people who haven't seen constellation, they will think, how can you? But when you see that in a constellation, when you see someone trying to be bigger than their country, you see how crazy it is, how absurd it is. How do you want to be bigger than Finland? I mean, it's nuts. Why would you want that? Why? And another thing you see in constellations is how the countries, they're so friendly, or they just want you. They have so much to give. Yeah. Why would you not take that? Why is not? Yeah. But I do think there is an element of gratification in this trashing your own country. It's like, oh, I'm bigger than this. Trashing. Yeah. That could be one, explanation for it. I don't know how to navigate. So I put up this, my map here, right? Which is my way of, when I look at this, I'm just like, yes, wow, this is my country. That gives me energy.
I have the same thing here. It's you can hear this. There's
it is Finland.
Map of my city and map of Finland, and this kind of different maps, but about Finland. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I have a needle where I am. The needle of my workplace and the needle of my home, because I want to know where I am. Because I know in my place, it's kind of family constellation.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's really good. So, I think what people like you and me, or at least myself, I think there's a little learning for me here. I think I should spend, just like some people, they spend too much energy sort of trying to push out their country or their parents or whatever. There's I think I have an element of spending a little bit too much pushing out certain political positions on the left. I don't know why actually, but I think I need to, for instance, like with, I don't know how much we should go into. There's something about this Black Lives Matter that's,
when I was a teenager and early adulthood, I was an anarchist and I had a mohawk and I was really extreme leftist. So I think I have a little bit insight on that kind of thinking, and I'm getting more conservative kind of. Yeah. No, not so conservative, but anyway. Maybe we will start a little bit wrap this up, because before going into politics, because then it will explode. But I have to just say one.
I do need to say one final thing.
Yes.
Which kind of occurs to me now, and I'm saying this maybe a little bit like a family constellation sentence. I think there is something in Black Lives Matter that there's a little learning thing in that. However, I have no clue what it is right now. I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to learn from Black Lives Matter, but I'm sure that there's something there. That's a little. This was a little talking point to myself. I'm not putting that on anyone else, but it's just something I learned right now talking to you. So, thank you.
And I think if I want to say last word for that, I think there is about this Black Lives Matters and also this kind of ideological identity, let's say warfare. There is a kind of collective daddy issues happening in the world. So this is half joke, but half I mean it. But anyway, I would like to end this. I have one last more thing I would like to talk about with you, and this is going a little bit really, let's say, far away and really kind of theological idea. And please tell me what you think.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know. Have you been listening to the Jordan Peterson biblical series?
No. It's something that I've been. I need to, and I've never got around to it. So no, I haven't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's like for me, that's the best Peterson.
I've heard people say that.
Deepest stuff there. And there was this lady who, well, this is a funny story, but a lady sent an email or mail to Jordan Peterson, and the lady went to this ceremony of, and she did ayahuasca and this
yeah.
psychedelic plant, and then
Yeah.
and he met Jordan Peterson on this trip.
She met Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, in his mind
on her ayahuasca trip.
Yeah. And
wow.
And she asked the spirit of ayahuasca that who is Jordan Peterson. So and the spirit is they call her mother, the spirit of the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother answered that Jordan Peterson is one who will reawaken the masculine principle in our world. And I understand that this statement is quite I don't know what it is, but I think there's truth there, and because it answers my question there, that why are men drawn into Jordan Peterson so much? That there is a kind of hole in a man's heart of this about the masculine principle. It's kind of lost. And if you ask Jordan Peterson about it, he will say that the idea is the death of the God, what Nietzsche said in 200 years ago, that because we have our scientific method has kind of killed the necessity of religion, and in the religion there is the God, the Father, and that's kind of reflects something that it's really deep in us.
Yeah,
and we don't content with the idea of a God the Father, then we will be lost. That we have to find some kind of relationship with this idea of God. There is no question here, but just I just wanted to share this with you.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Yeah. I don't know what to. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I don't know what to add to that. I think that's. So one of the things that is, it's no longer unique, but when Jordan Peterson came out, one of the things that was kind of rare was that he could talk about masculinity in a positive way. So he said masculinity is good, femininity is good as well, of course, but masculinity is good. And this is something that I've come to appreciate very much. And so this was also one of my many great experience. So my teacher, Doris, my family constellations teacher, she does the same. She talks about men and masculinity and fathers in a good way. And it just, I mean, you can sense that when she does that, it's like all the energy just goes up, and it's just so beautiful. And there's other examples of that. And I will actually say one of the things I've noticed is that I like to hear when men do that, like with Jordan Peterson. But when women do it, speak positively about masculinity, I get so moved. So another there's a woman called Janice Firmingo. Do you know her?
No.
Okay, so she's a professor of, I'm not even sure, maybe literature, something in Toronto, somewhere in Canada. And I follow her on Twitter, and I've also read stuff she's written, and she has these, but she's also very, she has this thing, she has a YouTube channel also. And sometimes she will just talk about men or masculinity like in a positive way, in quite sort of simple terms. And whenever I hear that, I just, it's just nice. Yeah. And there was also this was in the wake of the Me Too movement. There was a group of women who made a little movie or a little video, and I think it was called From Women to Men. I mean, I would recommend anyone. Maybe you could put a link in your. I would recommend anyone to go, anyone to go watch it. It's the first 3 times I watched it, I just cried. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And it's just women who like appreciate men. There's so much power in that. Yeah.
So good. So maybe we end here. This was 2 hours long. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. And I have to do more of these in English because I feel that I have these ideas that I would like to share, but my tongue gets stuck in my mouth. But I think I did quite okay.
No, yeah. You can, maybe your tongue gets stuck, but your heart doesn't get stuck, which is the most important thing. So yeah.
So when we're ending, if somebody is interested on your work or your books, or where they can find you?
Well, so the book, I'm hoping it will be out in September.
Yep.
So they should look out for that. Maybe we can, I mean, when it comes out, maybe we can do another podcast or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I have to first read the book, of course. So I have.
Yeah. Maybe I'm doing a false flag. So inside, men are bad. There's 700 genders, and so it's all a decoy. Maybe, but no. What else? They can also. I'm also on Twitter, but I don't. I think it would be. They can follow. Fine. They can follow me on Twitter, but I don't tweet very much, and rarely. I rarely tweet anything about men. It's mostly about money and banking. So, and I'm not on Facebook. I have an email. Shoot me an email. I have this. I'll just present it now. I have this vague idea. I haven't quite but I have this idea of this. I think the way I'm going to publish the book, I want to retain the rights. Speaking of, you talked about sovereignty before, and I think part of my becoming a man is getting more sovereignty. So I want to be more sovereign. So I retain the rights, which means that I can publish it wherever I want. And I have this idea, I want to get it out in other languages. Yeah. So if there's one of your listeners or who is sort of into this kind of stuff and who's maybe a little bit, they don't have to be into Heidegger, but they into philosophy or whatever, and who would like to translate it, then we could make a deal and maybe we could put it out in Finnish. That would be, so if there's one of your listeners who is just vaguely interested in that, they can shoot me an email. I need to think a little bit more about it, but yeah, that may be an option.
And definitely you should do an audiobook because it's so much people are more listening to audiobooks than reading books. And I think that's the one thing about Jordan Peterson, that he does so much podcast and this kind of thing that people can listen it. Because reading about this kind of quite philosophical and hard subject, it's really hard. And I don't know if I can read the Maps of Meaning book, maybe someday, but I have listened to it, and then it's easier to digest this way.
That's I have to remember that. Yeah, I have to remember that.